Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to The Sick Podcast. Coast to coast college football.
Oh, the band is out on the field. He's going to go into the end zone. He's going into the end zone.
The sickest college football podcast.
There goes Davis. Oh, my God. Davis is going to run it all the way back. Auburn's going to win the football game. Auburn's going to win the football game. He ran the missed field goal back. He ran it back 109 yards.
It's going to be sick.
That's right. It's the Sick Podcast, coast to coast college football show. I'm John Lund, the East Coast side. He's Dan Lynch, the West Coast transplant. It is Thursday, June 5th, 2025. As we record this, we're excited to bring you yet another college football show. And if you were online at any point on Thursday, quite a day on the old internet machine on some of the social media outlets that folks might be familiar with. A little back and forth, little haymakers between the most richest person in the world and the most powerful orange man in the country. Great day to be an internet person. How are things on the West Coast, Dan?
Amazing. I mean, I was in an hour and a half traffic today, but other than that, I'm assuming you're talking about Ryan Day and the head coach of Texas Tech, right? That's what you're referencing?
Ryan Day, Texas Tech, obviously the big news to come out of today's news cycle, and maybe the biggest news of Thursday, Paige announcing that she's not coming back to Summer House when they filmed that for the next season. She announced that she will not be participating. So just devastating if you're a fan of that show.
Yeah, that's our other podcast on Sick Media that we'll get into later. But yes, I don't know what the Hamptons are going to do. And I've been thinking about it a lot, John, but we're not here to talk about that today. We're here to talk about the Real Housewives of college football, aka what the off season is.
College football in itself is quite a reality show for fans of the sport. So you don't have to worry about trying to get your fix in. Shout out as well to Andy Cohen, who tweeted out, "Let me host the reunion special for the things that went down today." Be a great host for it if he had both those gentlemen on his show to kind of see what the temperature is like for both.
Honestly, that would be amazing.
He's fantastic at reunion shows, so there'd be no one better to get to the bottom of whatever the hell is going on in our beautiful country. Shout out to our friends in Canada not having to deal with the circus that is now the United States of America. But speaking of the United States of America and college football, one of its most beloved sports, there was some news that happened in the sports world this past week because of the NBA playoffs and where they stand now, moving to the finals, and ABC and ESPN getting to pick up those games, that it was the last iteration of NBA on TNT inside the NBA, with Shaquille O'Neal, Kenny Smith, Charles Barkley, and Ernie Johnson, a staple of pregame, halftime, and postgame shows for many years now. Ernie's been with the Turner Company for 3 decades. They will be moving to ESPN for their next season, though the show, I doubt, will be able to be the exact same product that we're used to seeing when it comes to what they're able to do on a weekday sometimes basis, and especially after the biggest games in the NBA. They're kind of the place that you turn to for interviews with the coaches, with the players, and just hysterical commentary where things can go off the rails at a drop of a hat, which leads us into another change that will be coming into the college football world, and that is College GameDay on ESPN, that will have a little bit of a different look when it comes to this season, as they announced that Lee Corso, a Hall of Fame stalwart of that show for, again, several decades. He's been on that program since we've been watching TV. So it's going back into the early 90s, where he's just been a face and voice of that show. One of the best commentators in college football history. Folks obviously will know him for donning a mascot hat when he makes his final pick of the night as to who's going to win the game that they're usually at. And he's just a hysterical person to have on that program, and somebody that just absolutely loves college football. Unfortunately for him, Father Time is slowly catching up, and Father Time never loses its races. Lee Corso turns 90 on August 7th, coming up in a couple months. and he will have a swan song in the first week of their show to kind of say goodbye to everybody and put a cap on a long and lustrous career as a college football analyst for that program. So they'll obviously have a little bit of a different feel now than what we're used to. They've sort of been trying to bring forth a newer show on what it will be now in the future without Lee Corso, bringing Pat McAfee aboard, bringing Nick Saban, now that he's retired, in quotes, who knows if he'll ever come back from Alabama, so that you get his voice on the program as well. So they've kind of shifted gears into what the show will now be, and Lee will thankfully get his moment in the sun to pay his respects from everybody, and it's going to be great to see him have the opportunity to be honored in a way that he deserves. So to ask you this, Dan, what has that show been as a college football fan, and especially with Lee Corso at the helm, just having memorable moments seemingly every week to kick off every Saturday afternoon and get everybody excited for the games coming down the slate for college football?
I mean, when I think about Saturdays in the fall, of course you think about the games, but the first real picture that comes to my mind is the zoom into the set, right? With all the fans behind him. And that really starts off my morning, John, because that starts at 8 a.m. Maybe even earlier, depending on my Friday night. Sometimes I'll wake up and see the start of it. But there are some times where I'm tuning in right at the end when he's putting on the mascot hat, the helmet or whatever.
That's not just something that happens on the West Coast. I've been known to do a similar thing over on the East Coast, where you just catch the last couple of minutes of that show before starting your day.
11:52 a.m. I'm up. I'm ready to go. We got a beautiful game in Nebraska. I mean, that's the first thing that comes to mind. And it's going to be a bit of a change, but I feel like ESPN has done a good job of kind of getting us ready for that point for him to leave, right? Adding Nick Saban in last year, adding McAfee, who is just wild every single weekend. I love the kicks that he does with the students. It's just a ton of fun. I've been lucky enough to see 2 of the broadcasts and kind of how they all go on. And, a little bit behind the scenes, it's straight up them and all these crazy people. And the craziest thing I took when I was watching it, they don't have too many interactions during the breaks with producers or anything. It's just straight them. So that kind of makes the show just more realistic. Really, they're just going right off the top. You could tell sometimes the producer's definitely getting in Reese's ear and hey, move, we got to move and go. But other than that, it's strictly them, and it's just a beautiful show. It's going to be a bit of a change, but man, we're just getting older, John. We're just getting older. My question to you is do you think Nick Saban, right? He probably does this for another, let's just say 15 years, right? He could probably do another 15. Do you think in 15 years, people think of Nick Saban as a media personality instead of a head coach? Because that's what pretty much happened to Lee Corso.
That's a great question. And also funny that Nick Saban happens to be the same age as a certain head coach at North Carolina football who has had zero news about him in the last couple months off the field. It's just been on to Cincinnati for that program. I think that's probably the goal of the show, is their best bet is turning Nick Saban into a media personality to get the college audience to enjoy him as somebody that can talk about the games and not necessarily somebody that just comes out and sits down and goes, well, I've won 6, 7, 8, 9. The number will get higher and higher as the years get more past, and you tell stories about the glory days. You kind of showboat them a little bit more than you were actually doing at the time. I think that'll be their goal, is to turn him into a great media personality. And he still is in tune with the game. He can break down teams. He could break down plays. Maybe the fear would be that he might end up getting into something that we've started to see with Tony Romo, say, on the NFL side, where those first couple years he was electric, calling out plays way before they even happened, circling diagrams. This is going down. He's throwing here. He's guarding this guy. And he would be right on many of his predictions. But as the game has slowly passed him by a little bit, those predictions have gotten less and less, where he's just not in tune as much as he was as a player or somebody that just played knowing everybody on the field, which is understandable. And that'll happen with Nick Saban, where the players that he knows are going to graduate or move schools. As we know at the transfer portal and NIL, teams are just basically ripped up every year and you're starting from scratch. So after those guys start leaving, and even after some coaches maybe start either changing schools or retiring altogether where it's not as familiar to him, it'll be interesting to see if he can keep up with the sport of college football. I don't doubt that he will.
Right.
And I wonder how long he'll want to keep continuing to do a show like that. He seems like a type of person like a Bear Bryant was or a Joe Paterno, where they need college football in their life. If they shut that switch off, they just don't know what to do with themselves. So it just might be something where he's comfortable only having to work 1 day a week, do a couple calls on a Thursday, Friday, and get ready for the game. Obviously, coaches are going to want to talk to Nick Saban about what's going on with their teams and be completely open with their playbooks and let him know everything he needs to be able to do the broadcast. And if he's comfortable letting Pat McAfee stand up on the table and scream to the crowd, and that hasn't bothered him yet, I think that won't be a problem moving forward. So they've really found their footing with trying to put together a show that could compete with the big noon kickoff on Fox, which is, I believe, still taking hold of the standings and rankings for the last couple of years. They seem to get the more views when it comes to pregame shows. So they're in that competition. Who can we bring on to really make things exciting? And that's really all they're probably looking forward to, is how do we keep this show entertaining and how do we keep people tuned in, and how do we move on from somebody like Lee Corso, who was a staple with just a simple, I'm going to put on this mascot head and wave to the crowd, but it was so beloved. And I don't think they'll bring that back.
No.
I don't think anybody else can do that. So what'll be the next thing that really takes them to the next level? It'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, I was thinking about that too. Like, you got a kibosh, right? Like, that was his thing. You can't have one of them put the helmets on and do it. It just wouldn't feel the same. Right? Like, we agree with that.
I don't think they can. I think they have to retire it. I think he puts on his last helmet, his last mascot head for this last game, and that's it. They kind of throw the shoes up over the electrical wire, and that'll be it.
Okay. The one thing that they do is, right, they bring on the guest picker, and last year the big one was Timothy Chalamet, right?
Sure. Star.
Okay. Star. Everyone was like, he was amazing on it. But as I was watching it, this was actually one of the games that I didn't go out on a Friday night, so I caught most of the broadcast. In my opinion, everyone was like, he knows the game so well. Like, he's studied up. I was watching him and I'm like, he's reading off of something. And I'm like, who else missed? Like, how did you miss that? He's clearly reading off of a script. And listen, following college football, maybe Timothy will now listen to the the College Football Coast to Coast podcast. So the next time he goes on, he could be more prepared and not actually look at he's reading something. But, you know, it is kind of cool when they bring on like just personalities. Obviously, the comedian, I'm blanking on his name right now, who called Saban Alabama Jones. Oh my gosh, what's his name?
Sean.
Is it Sean? No, Shane Gillis. Shane Gillis. That was amazing. And Shane is a true college football fan. So
Shane loves Notre Dame. Yes. And
Notre Dame.
His breakdown of what it was like to take a jab at Nick Saban and what the ramifications were going to be from that was great TV in itself. It's hard to come at the king. You best not miss, as the saying goes.
No,
he had to be ready for it. He was a couple beers in, and he was for it.
Let it rip, Shane. Let it rip. Okay. Do you think they bring Shacking a Fool to ESPN?
Wow. I think they will. I think that's something that they'll have to continue a tradition with. And I don't know if they're going to try and implement anything from inside the NBA on any other programs, or if they're going to try to leak any other programs into inside the NBA. The biggest fear for people is obviously Stephen A. Smith's going to be a part of something. They'll throw him involved, or Kendrick Perkins, and guys that already cover the league that we don't need, that we already have the lineup set. People even get pissed if it's Draymond Green sitting in for a show. Like, you can't win when it's not just those core four guys. It's very difficult to have a different voice, even if it's Vince Carter or Candace Parker or Adams takes over for Ernie. Like, people are just, no, these have to be the four guys, and we can't go away from it. So there's the fear that they're either not going to have enough time either during halftime or before the game or after to do a similar show where they just had plenty of airspace to fill, and it'll be contained into a smaller portion of a show that folks aren't going to enjoy, or they're going to try and ESPN the show, which a lot of people aren't looking forward to. And it's not like ESPN has been known to enjoy programming that can just go off the rails at a second's notice. Pat McAfee is probably the most extreme that they've ever gotten to putting a show on the air that can just go crazy, and they have to just go, well, we knew what we were signing up for. If you want the team from inside the NBA to come to your channel, this is what you're going to get. Similarly to bringing Pat McAfee onto College GameDay, knowing that he might stand on top of his chair and do the chant for whatever school that they're visiting that week. You kind of know what you're going to get with these guys, and hopefully they're accepting of that, and they just let them build a product because we know that they can be successful. Those are shows that you just kind of have to let them go and do their thing, while also keeping it on the rails a little for the content purposes, right? And I think the hardest thing for a college football show, maybe ours specifically, but we only have a half hour to fill each week, which isn't too hard on our voices or on our preparations. Shout out Timothy Chalamet, who I think got a lot of props because there were a couple Maction games that they threw in at him, and just because he knew the team names, everybody was on board. This dude watches Maction. He's a college football fan for life. The difficulty and the criticisms that some of these shows get when they're previewing games is they're not necessarily focused on the Big 12 or the ACC. It's very SEC, Big 10 driven, as college football, the sport is. So they're picking games and they're kind of poo-pooing if there's a Big 12 matchup. And this happened too in the college football playoff where Arizona State wasn't getting any respect. And they were just kind of like, let's get to the games that matter. And fans of those conferences were like, hey, we exist too. And that's hard to do in college football, where you have to know all these teams, all these games, and be able to speak fluently on at least most of them. So it's not easy to be able to do that, but they also can't just fall into the trap where it becomes something that we would just see on SEC Network. They have to be able to dive into those other games and other conferences, even if they don't necessarily want to. That's the bet that you've kind of made. Not only just being talented and being able to go out and do whatever you'd want to do every Saturday, but making sure that you're clicking the boxes for each conference and for each fan base. So it's a big balancing act that they have to do. It's not always easy. And a lot of times they will fall back on the bigger storylines, the bigger schools, etc., which ESPN has been known to do on programs like First Take. What's going to get the clicks for social media today? Cowboys, Lakers, LeBron. Wash, rinse, and repeat. Well, in college football, it's the SEC and the Big 10, and we'll see if the other two Power 4 conferences can compete. More often than not, they feel like they can. So if there was a change or anything that can be made to that show, it would be more of a focus, at least for me, to try and get all the fan bases covered.
Yeah, no doubt. And I could tell you we are going to do our best effort when we get into the football season to cover absolutely everything in the half hour. Maybe we go a little bit longer on some episodes, but yeah, I mean, really, because the entire college football web does tell the entire story of the actual weekend going on. Another entity that is struggling right now with the idea of trying to keep everyone involved is the college football playoff. Head coach of Ohio State, Ryan Day, came out and said straight up, the Big 10 should have 4 teams in there. The SEC should have 4 teams in there, and then fill everything out for the rest. We kind of talked about this last week, John, right? Like, the balance of college football, what's actually important, what's not. And we did it with the SEC, but now it's kind of trickling into the Big 10. 1, do you agree with that? 2, if you were another commissioner like Brett Yormark, or the commissioner of the ACC, how would you respond to that? Because it's just like, well, what are we? Are we nothing compared to you guys? Like, it's just wild.
Yeah, Jim Phillips and Brett Yormark just having to not necessarily play catch up, but every once in a while come out and wave and let everybody know that they still exist, unfortunately has been the theme of late for both of those conferences.
Yeah.
It was interesting hearing his comments, especially coming off a national championship, because you don't know what he's going to think, or as we mentioned in our show last week, how, not to say easy, but compared to other teams, how easy, in quotation marks, Ohio State's path to the national championship was. Now, they beat teams that were in the AP top 5 to get to where they were throughout the season, and it's not like they weren't playing anybody. But when people first looked at the bracket and you looked at who was going to have to face who, Ohio State had an easier draw, at least last year when it came to that. So for him to also want to stand up for the Big Ten and be on a pulpit to say, hey, we deserve 4 teams. We're, if not the best conference, at least the second best conference behind the SEC.
1A, 1B. Yeah.
Yeah. 1A, 1B. It's not surprising to hear him say that. And to be kind of the first spokesperson for the Big Ten to piggyback off the comments that SEC made for getting in 4 teams. But if you're the other conferences, the Big 12 and the ACC, it's still a matter of, hey, we still have a seat at this table, and there's going to be years where we're going to have teams that are deserving of this conversation. Joey McGuire, the head coach of Texas Tech, was on with Dusty and Danny in the morning on Sirius XM Channel 84. Shameless plug for them, 6 to 9 Eastern, I believe, if you want to get up early and see what they have to say about college football. He said that basically you've got to earn it on the field. If you're a conference champion, you should get in. And everything after that, we figure out who the best teams are to get into the playoffs. It's not who the best teams are in certain conferences. It's who the best teams are in the country. If you're not going to say that you're going to have automatic qualifiers for every Power 4 conference and it's all equal, then let's do it on the field. If you win your conference, you're in, and then find the best teams that way. I think that's the way we should do it. Now, the funny anecdote for Texas Tech that people can poke fun at, we want to do it on the field and we'll prove to you that we're one of the best teams, is their schedule this year for the non-conference opens up with Arkansas, Pine Bluff, Kent State, and Oregon State. So they're not exactly playing juggernauts to open up their season and get those bragging rights to be able to say, look at the teams we've beaten when we weren't playing in the Big 12. But his point still stands, and we've talked about this on the show before, how far in advance these schedules are made. And despite it not being the hardest thing in the world to be able to handpick teams, it's going to be difficult, although the conversation is being had more often now that if everybody wants this equal and we're strength of schedules and all those discussions for how difficult the season is, well, if you're complaining about non-conferences not being equal, well, make your non-conferences have to play other Power 4 teams.
Yeah.
So if you go into the ACC or you go into the SEC or you go into the Big Ten, similar to how exciting tournaments are in college basketball where conferences play each other and they have 14 games and they decide it on the field and they use that at the end of the season on their resumes. It would be great in college football if that was a mandatory thing where if you want your non-conference to be competitive, quote unquote, start scheduling teams from other Power 4 conferences instead of these, not to offend these other schools, but they call them cupcake games.
Yeah.
And in the SEC, not only do you get cupcake games, you get them in November.
Exactly.
When the season is already being a battle for the majority of college football teams, and they're vying for spots in week 13 and week 14. And Alabama is playing the little sisters of the poor and get an easy 56-point win because they have to score as many points as possible to help their
just
resume.
To be in. Exactly. And we've talked about this on the podcast so many times. There's such an imbalance in college football. But the one thing that I can say for Texas Tech is if they want to boost their schedule this year, King's College out in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, aka the MAC champs, are taking on anyone. So I would love to see them go up to Wilkes-Barre, the Diamond City, and see what's really going on up there. But no, it's going to be interesting. But hey, Texas Tech, man, $40 million roster, brother. They got some coin down in Lubbock. So hey, maybe he knows something and is like, hey, I think we could be there. We could totally compete in the Big 12 this year, even though my pick in the Big 12 that we'll definitely get into later in the summer, but a little preview ASU again, man. I think ASU.
Well, they're going to have hard enough games themselves, Texas Tech. And speaking of Arizona State, they play there October 18th.
Yep.
They've got to go play at Utah this upcoming year. They're going to play
hard
at
place
Kansas
to play.
State.
Yep.
They got to play BYU, even though that's at home. We know what BYU has turned itself into. And they end their season at West Virginia. I don't know if that'll be a night game or not, but a West Virginia night game isn't something that's going to be a great way to end your season. So they've already got they've already got hard games on their schedule, regardless of their non-con. So they're probably going to be, if you ask Joey McGuire with some truth serum, happy to have those 3 quote unquote cupcake games to open the year and try to figure out where they're at, because they've just run in a quarterback injury seemingly for the last 4 years, where they have everything set and ready to go. And before you know it, a Tyler Shuck breaks his leg, and now you're going to your backup guy, and then his arm is tired at the end of the season because he didn't know he was going to be a starter. And they've just had this Ferris wheel of quarterbacks that they've had to deal with, and that's really hurt them the last couple of years. But Joey McGuire is electric when it comes to Texas football, and he's been building this program up to what he's done beforehand, just traveling around the state, picking out the best players. So it's exciting to see what he can be capable of as a head coach when he has a couple years under his belt, and quite the payroll to help bring in some guys that may help the team. So keep an eye on Texas Tech.
That oil money. The only thing I have with Joey McGuire is it's like, when I hear the name Joey McGuire, I don't think about a head football coach. Joe McGuire. Yeah, now we're in play. Coach Joe McGuire.
Yes, it's Joe.
It's Joe. Yeah, maybe this year, maybe that's what it is. It's like, hey, I'm not Joey anymore. It's Joe. Boom, they win the Big 12 title, man.
That's it. We'll have to get him on the horn and see if he'll be okay with changing that. So we have a little bit of time at the end of the show, thankfully. We'll get into these as shows go on, and we have time for it. A segment I like to call Toast or Roast. And Friday being National Donut Day, you say you have a great story about donuts, a hot take, if you will, a toast or roast for National Donut Day for us.
So I'm going to roast donuts. When I moved to Los Angeles in 2019, the first thing I noticed driving around was how many donut shops there are in this city. It seems like every single block. I am from New Jersey originally, the home of the best bagel in the entire country, maybe the world. Unfortunately, we don't have great bagels in LA. We have a few spots that, like, okay, it could pass, but you know what? It's not worth like $11. And I'm not kidding. $11 for a bagel with cream cheese. So the alternative in LA is like, hey, get a donut. I tried switching to the donut lifestyle. I tried all the crazy ones, you name it. I just can't get on it, man. I just can't start my day with a donut. And my take on donuts is they're a dessert, not a breakfast.
See, I have an opposing take for that, and it's an unhealthy one, but I love a quick breakfast, in quotation marks, to be a cupcakes, a little Debbie's, a coffee cake, a Twinkie. And if you want to throw a donut in there, I can stomach one for a quick breakfast, a little chocolate glaze to get the day going. But it's kind of just something where you have to train your mind to not have it in your head that this is breakfast. It's supposed to be healthy. Why is it not fruit or eggs or something that can give me the energy to get going? Because you would assume a sugar crash is on the horizon, and that's not necessarily what you want at 9 a.m. when you're trying to get going while you're drinking your coffee. But though people will say, like my wife, donuts, cupcakes, etc., are not breakfast, I often sometimes go against the grain and can throw back a couple donuts to start the day. Now, you have to be careful, though. You can't have too many or things are just going to go off the rails for you. The difference with donuts is, again, as you're mentioning, the price. You're throwing away way too much money to start your morning on these donuts, especially when they're at non-chain donut places and they have their own spin on things, and you might get a decent sized portion and a great amount of icing or whatever you're going for, but it's also going to hurt your wallet. And as you're saying, we're getting close to a $10 breakfast and it's just a donut and a coffee. I don't really think that that's necessarily the way you should start your day. It's a little bit of a distraction to really get things started, but I don't hate it. And I will toast donuts as potentially a breakfast if you get the right ones and you start your day off with a little bit of a sugar rush.
Real quick here, where do we start on munchkins? AKA
Love
donut
Munchkins. Bowls. Love Munchkins. No free ads, but Munchkins, especially when you're young and there's a birthday party at any place, a bowling alley, somewhere fun, and mom rolls up with a box of Munchkins. Now, when you get older, it's the big box cup of Joe, box of Joe, whatever they call it. Again, no free ads. But for Munchkins, when you're young especially, there's nothing better. Now, the unfortunate part for Munchkins is people take all the good ones and you're left with the powdered white sugared donuts at the end. Nobody wants those because they're too messy, and those are always the last ones standing. So if you don't get to the box quick enough to get the good flavors, the chocolate, the regular frosting, and it's the white powdered sugar at the end, you're running into a lot of problems because you're going to get it all over your clothes. You're going to get it all over your hands. You're trying to get back out to play wherever you're at for the birthday. And now you're stuck with sticky fingers, and that's not what you're looking for. So unfortunately, the worst donuts, especially the ones, they throw in sometimes, they don't have any icing at all. They're just the actual donut, nothing attached. Yeah. What am I going to do with this? That's what you're left to take home. Wow.
Okay. John, we are on Sick Media Podcast Network, our Canadian brothers up north. No free ads, but Tim Hortons is very popular up there. Little trivia for you. Do you know what their Munchkin equivalent is called?
I don't, but I'm very giddy to hear what it is.
The Timbit.
Wow. I like it.
I kind of like that too. I like that name.
They've got a lot of catchy nicknames and different things that can work. Now, some things go a little bit too far. Mm-hmm. Let's not get carried away with our nicknames and our localization for some things. Sometimes, as you're saying, a bacon, egg, and cheese is a BEC, and that's the end. You don't have to fix a wheel that's not broken. But they do have some catchy, fun things that should catch on in this country. Avril Lavigne was just on Kylie Kelsey's podcast. Plug to her, of course, coming off having her fourth child with Jason Kelsey, and was talking about the ice cream in Canada being one of the best staples that they have, but several of their most popular flavors haven't made it over to the U.S. And she was going out for ice cream looking for these. There's like a rainbow tricolored vanilla-ish type of ice cream that's not a sherbet, but a similar type of look to it that she said is out of this world, and it doesn't exist in our country. So why haven't we brought that over from our Canadian friends? There's no reason for it. It's similar to when you go overseas. Some of us have been lucky enough to go to Italy. Hat tip to that.
Whoa, okay, gelato over here.
Yeah, they've got obviously their gelato lineups, but if you go to a place like the M Arch, no free ads, they've got McFlurries like pistachio flavored that's out of this world tasting. Why hasn't that come down to us? And they're just holding it hostage in these places. So in one sense, shout out for that being your delicacies. But in another sense, I'd like some. I'd want to try an In-N-Out burger if you brought it over to the East Coast, folks. Come to New York. Every chain imaginable is here. Just throw up a pop-up shop and the line will be around the block.
It would be insane.
Plural. 2-hour wait to get a hamburger. Sometimes how it is when a new Chick-fil-A opens. Listen, there's 16 other restaurants on this one street. What are you doing standing in line? Pro tip to anybody traveling to New York City. Never stand in line for anything.
No.
Whatever you're standing in line for, there's something either equivalent to or better than down the street. Just keep walking a little farther. You'll find it. No reason to stand in line, especially now when it's 1,000 degrees outside. No line standing in the city.
Oh, man.
You have to draw the line somewhere.
So at the end of the day, don't stand on lines. And Sammy, send us ice cream, dude. We are waiting. You know our addresses. Send us ice cream.
Flavors
We are
that
waiting.
exist in your country that have just not come our way. And as an ice cream connoisseur, we need them. So that's our plea to our listeners. Get in touch with us on our social medias account. I'm at London Bridge. He's at Dan Lynch Spurts, SPURTS. We're also at SickPod CFB. You can follow us on Twitter. And hopefully we can interject some of the haymakers that have been thrown on the old internet machine here and there. You'll see clips from our show and all sorts of fun discussions. You can reach out to us and ask us questions or comment on your favorite donut. We're on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Twitter. That's the Sick Media Coast to Coast College Football Show. And that's it for us this week. Now I'm kind of in the mood for a donut, a coffee, or more specifically, ice cream. What are we doing?
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Sick Podcast Coast to Coast College Football on YouTube, X, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts.